Have you ever witnessed a moment so shockingly unfair that it made your heart pound, your eyes widen, and every nerve in your body sizzle with indignation? In today's story, we'll see a startling altercation at Hartsfield-Jackson. Atlanta International Airport, a place usually buzzing with excitement, hope, and the promise of new adventures. A courteous black woman asks for assistance, only to be rudely dismissed by an irritable attendant who has no time or patience for what he sees as trivial requests. Little does he know she's not just any passenger. She's one of the airline's secret inspectors, and this day will change everything. The morning sun bathed Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport in a gentle golden glow. Flights were starting to roll out. Travelers bustled to and fro, some hurrying toward departure gates, others lounging drowsily on seats near coffee stands. Even at 6:00 a.m., the airport was alive with that particular brand of energy, excitement, and tension, as though anything could happen at any moment. At the Delta Airlines check-in counter, Toby Harrington was on duty, feeling less than thrilled about his early morning shift. He'd come straight from a night out with friends that had ended just a few hours before his alarm went off. Despite the crisp airport air conditioning, Toby felt hot and agitated. Bags under his eyes threatened to betray his lack of sleep, and his impatience was perched precariously at the tip of his tongue, ready to lash out at the slightest inconvenience. Not that Toby was always a bad guy. He had a strong sense of humor and could be quite charming when he wanted to be. But after months of feeling underappreciated and overworked at the airline, his temper had begun to show. He had grown tired of the endless lines of people needing something. Seat changes, baggage tags, wheelchair assistance, flight connections. He was drained, and on this particular morning, a storm was brewing in his chest, waiting for a spark. Some feet behind Toby's check-in counter, Simone Carter strode confidently through the airport. She wore a simple but elegant travel outfit, black trousers, a crisp white blouse, and a navy jacket. Her hair was braided neatly, and she had the posture of someone used to moving efficiently through busy spaces. She paused at a kiosk to scan the airport map on her phone and mentally reviewed the day's assignment. Unbeknownst to Toby or any other employee, Simone was a corporate quality control inspector for Delta Airlines. Today she was incognito, traveling as an ordinary passenger, tasked with evaluating staff performance under real passenger conditions. She had done this kind of secret inspection at smaller regional airports before, but Atlanta was in a league of its own. She'd been asked specifically to focus on passenger experience and employee courtesy, paying special attention to how staff addressed travelers from all walks of life. Simone took a deep breath and reminded herself why she was there, to ensure that each customer, regardless of race background or any other factor, was treated with dignity and respect. Though she couldn't prevent every unfair situation from arising, her evaluations could weed out consistent bad behavior, resulting in training or disciplinary measures that could dramatically improve the company's customer satisfaction. Still, it was a delicate role to play. She needed to be treated like an average passenger, so she always kept her identity hidden until the end of her evaluations. Her phone buzzed with a reminder notification. Her scheduled flight to Miami was in 3 hours, giving her plenty of time to observe staff members in different areas of the terminal. She decided first to pay attention to check-in protocols. Slipping into the queue, she observed Toby, who appeared to be the only attendant at the front of this particular line. She noticed the slump of his shoulders, the growing scowl on his face, and the way he tapped his pen incessantly on the counter. Even from a few feet away, Simone could tell Toby was either frustrated or extremely fatigued. Possibly both. The line was relatively short, but Toby's impatience seemed to lengthen every interaction. A woman with 3 small children approached, struggling with their passports and boarding passes. Toby's answers to her questions were clipped barely polite. He instructed her about baggage fees, flight delays, and seating arrangements without even looking her in the eye. He kept checking his watch, as though he had somewhere more important to be. After a short wait, Simone stepped forward when it was her turn. She put on a friendly smile, intending to keep her request straightforward. "Good morning," she said, offering Toby a respectful nod. "I was wondering if you could confirm if my flight is still on schedule." Toby barely glanced at her. He took her ticket from her hand, without a word, tapped at the keyboard, and said flatly, "Flight 1271 is on time. It boards in 2 hours and 57 minutes. Anything else, Simone thanked him, but she sensed the tension. His tone was abrupt, his words curt. There was no real effort to engage, no warmth behind his eyes. However, for the moment, Toby had done his job at least in the most technical sense. Simone decided to see if that chilly attitude might improve with subsequent interactions, or if it was part of a deeper pattern. She planned to return in a while with another question, something simple but pressing enough for an average passenger to ask twice. Leaving Toby's counter, Simone kept her eye on the interplay between Toby and other passengers. When an older man with a thick accent struggled to understand an electronic kiosk for self-check-in, Toby waved him off with a dismissive gesture toward the machine, telling him to follow the instructions on the screen. The man walked away, looking more confused than ever. Simone quietly made a mental note. As part of her hidden role, she was specifically trained to notice subtleties, lack of eye contact, short or impatient remarks, or any sign that an employee's behavior might cross the line into unprofessional conduct. Toby, she surmised, might be on the verge of failing an inspection, and he had no clue who she was. About half an hour later, Simone decided to make her second approach. By now, Toby's line was even shorter, but his frustration had seemingly deepened. He had snapped at a colleague who asked if he needed a coffee break. He'd rolled his eyes at a passenger who asked for a seat change. She saw him discreetly check his phone grimace and stow it in a drawer under the counter, as though there were some personal crisis unfolding. Simone stepped back into the line, waiting for 2 passengers ahead of her to finish. She refined her plan. She'd simply ask Toby if there were any updates on gate changes for her flight. With unpredictable gate adjustments and scheduling mishaps, it was a common question. Even if Toby was short on patience, it would reveal whether his discourtesy was consistent or triggered by certain types of travelers. Finally, it was her turn. "Hello again," Simone began in a polite tone. "Sorry to bother you, but I'd like to double-check the gate for flight 1271. My app said it might change." Toby, in the middle of scanning something on the computer, raised a hand, abruptly signaling her to stop talking. He let out a sharp sigh, typed furiously for a moment, then barked, "It's still gate B17, all right. If there's a change, your phone will let you know." In that curt dismissal, Simone felt the sting of prejudice. Toby hadn't used any slurs or overtly discriminatory language, but there was a tension in his tone. She was a black woman, politely asking a reasonable question, and he had basically waved her off as though she were a nuisance. Did he treat everyone like this? Or was it just specific types of people? Simone couldn't be sure yet, but her instincts were telling her it wasn't just a case of him being tired. She cleared her throat and tried once more, gently but firmly. "I appreciate it." "Could you please confirm if I already told you?" Toby snapped. "Any change will show up on your phone. Now, I have other people waiting, so if you don't mind." He gestured for the next person in line to step up, effectively dismissing Simone in the rudest manner possible. Her cheeks warmed not out of embarrassment, but anger. The attitude was beyond a matter of impatience. It verged on disrespect. Yet Simone maintained her composure. She reminded herself that employees sometimes faced enormous stress. But this was not how to handle it. This was going straight into her notes. The tension weighed heavily on her, but she stayed polite. "Thank you," she managed to say. She pivoted away and headed toward the nearest set of seats, a quiet fury simmering beneath her calm exterior. Little did Toby know that behind a nearby pillar, Patricia Brown, one of the senior managers for Delta Airlines at the Atlanta hub, had also been observing. Patricia had been informed that a secret inspector was on site today, though she didn't know who it was, and she wanted to ensure her staff performed up to the airline's standards. Patricia had worked for Delta for over 2 decades. She took immense pride in the company's culture, especially its commitment to customer service. She'd seen Toby from time to time, had even signed off on a couple of his performance reviews. He was known for being quick with routine tasks, but was also rumored to struggle with courtesy. She had flagged him for additional training in the past, but nothing had come of it yet, partly because Toby's immediate supervisors were busy with bigger personnel issues. Watching Toby's exchange with Simone, Patricia frowned. She saw the dismissive gesture, heard the edge in his voice, and felt a pang of disappointment. She realized that if Toby's performance was truly that harsh on a routine basis, he might fail miserably if the secret inspector happened to be evaluating him. And if so, Toby's job could be in jeopardy. Patricia resolved to keep an eye on Toby for the rest of the morning. If the rumored inspector came into Toby's path again, she wanted to see how Toby handled himself. After her second sharp encounter with Toby, Simone found a quiet corner near a large glass window overlooking the tarmac. She took out her notepad, disguised as a personal journal, and jotted down details. Check-in, Attendant Toby Harrington. Delta Terminal B, behavior. Impatient, dismissive, borderline, rude. Potential bias, or simply stressed, yet to confirm. Previous interactions with older passenger also abrupt. Further observation recommended. Simone also remembered the older gentleman Toby had brushed off at the self-check-in kiosk. She noticed him sitting nearby, rifling through his boarding pass and looking distressed. She felt compelled to help him not simply because it was part of her job to observe, but because that was who Simone was, empathetic, caring, unwilling to stand by while someone struggled. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly, taking the seat next to him. "I saw you earlier at the check-in desk. Are you having trouble with your boarding pass?" He looked up, relief flooding his face. "Yes, I don't understand these instructions. The attendant told me to use the kiosk, but it's not in my language, and I'm not sure how to get a printed boarding pass," he explained in halting English, clearly self-conscious. Simone patiently guided him through the steps, taking him to a kiosk that supported multiple languages. She showed him how to scan his passport and walked him through the prompts until the machine finally printed a new boarding pass. "Thank you so much," he said, almost bowing with gratitude. "You are very kind." Simone gave him a gentle smile. "Glad to help," she replied. She watched him walk away and felt a sense of fulfillment. Then the thought hit her, that was the basic courtesy Toby should have offered. And it had taken Simone 5 minutes less time than Toby spent complaining about his job to the next co-worker. Taking out her phone, Simone checked her flight status again. No updates. She had time before boarding. She decided to do a bit more roaming, maybe watch Toby from a distance. She often found that simply observing could reveal volumes about an employee's temperament. If Toby was prone to rudeness, he might show it again. Or maybe in a calmer moment he'd exhibit a kinder demeanor. But as Simone would soon discover, Toby's troubles were more complicated than mere fatigue or frustration. Behind the check-in counter, Toby stealthily checked his phone again. A cascade of text messages from his girlfriend Rachel illuminated the screen. Their relationship was on the rocks. She was threatening to move out of their shared apartment if he didn't clean up his act. Stop the late-night show, more commitment. Toby felt cornered. Between the stress of the job, the early shifts, and mounting personal issues, he was a pressure cooker about to explode. He'd nearly had an outburst with a co-worker who told him he needed to go on break. "Don't tell me what I need," Toby had hissed. Another co-worker tried to interject, but Toby pointed to the line forming again and turned away, seething. His phone vibrated in his pocket, a mocking reminder of the problems that waited for him when his shift ended. His manager, Patricia Brown, made her way toward him, trying to appear casual. "Toby," she said, "why don't you take a 15-minute break? We have enough staff on hand right now." He forced a tight smile and shook his head. "No thanks," he said curtly. "I'm fine. Got to keep the line moving." Patricia eyed him. "Are you sure you don't look fine?" "I'm good," Toby insisted through gritted teeth. Patricia didn't push it then. She left him alone for the moment, but made a mental note Toby was dangerously close to a meltdown. Simone continued walking through the terminal, collecting small interactions with other staff. Most of them were professional and courteous. They directed passengers to gates, answered questions about flight statuses, and even took a moment to smile. There were occasional hiccups. Airport work is stressful, but nothing like Toby's bristling hostility. Eventually, she wandered into a small coffee shop. She ordered a latte and settled at a table facing the walkway. She could see Toby in the distance, leaning against his check-in counter, arms crossed. He didn't appear to be assisting anyone at the moment. Simone wondered if she should approach him one more time with a new, justifiable question to see whether he'd improved or not. Some employees mellow out once they've had time to calm down. But Toby's body language suggested the opposite. His scowl deepened, his stance rigid. While Simone sipped her coffee, she noticed that same older man from earlier. He now stood near Toby's counter again, confusion painting his face. He started to step toward Toby, probably to ask for directions or more information. Toby's expression immediately hardened. Simone stood up, worried about what might happen next. The older gentleman spoke hesitantly, the word stumbling. Toby shook his head and pointed toward another area, likely telling him to go find another help desk. Simone couldn't hear the exchange well, but the man looked even more perplexed and upset after Toby finished speaking. Finally, Toby's gestures became obviously dismissive. The man turned away, clutching his boarding pass and looking as if he might be on the verge of tears. That was the moment Simone decided she could not, in good conscience, stand idly by. She quickly left the coffee shop and made her way toward the older man. Gently, she placed a hand on his shoulder, guiding him aside to ask if he needed help again. He nodded fervently, admitting he still didn't know which gate he should go to or whether his flight had changed. Simone guided him to a different Delta help counter, staffed by a middle-aged woman with a warm smile. Within minutes, the situation was resolved. The gate for the man's flight had indeed changed, and Simone escorted him in the right direction. Along the way, she heard him muttering words of thanks, combined with hints of frustration about the rude man who had refused to help him. Simone's heart clenched. She made sure the man got to his proper gate, then parted ways. She felt a knot in her chest that refused to loosen. What if that had been her grandmother? What if it was a first-time flyer from another country, Toby's disregard could cause someone to miss their flight entirely. This was precisely the kind of behavior Simone's role existed to identify and correct. Simone decided the time had come for a third and final approach. But first, she needed to speak with a manager anonymously, if possible, to see if Toby's name had come up in passenger complaints. Sometimes she would do that if she suspected there was a pattern. She discovered that the main customer service desk was located near Gate A5, so she headed there, weaving through crowds of travelers rolling luggage and the swirl of airport announcements echoing overhead. At the customer service desk, a pleasant representative named Clara greeted her. Simone introduced herself as a concerned passenger. "I had an encounter with a check-in attendant named Toby Simone," began carefully. He seemed, well, less than friendly. "Has anyone else mentioned anything about Toby Harrington recently?" Clara's professional smile faltered. She glanced around, then leaned in, speaking in a hushed tone. "I can't disclose formal complaints, but I can say that Toby's behavior has been noted by management. There have been some issues." Simone thanked her politely, ensuring not to press too hard or reveal her actual purpose. She walked away, the puzzle pieces clicking into place. Toby was indeed on the radar. This was not a one-off bad day. Time moved differently when you were watching someone closely, every movement, every shift in tone, every blink. Simone had spent the last 2 hours circling the terminal like a silent observer watching Toby Harrington from afar. She saw no signs of improvement, only signs of a man unraveling. He had refused multiple offers to take a break. His posture was stiff. His eyes darted to his phone every few minutes, and his interactions, though fewer now as the morning rush slowed, continued to carry the same curt edge, the same flicker of impatience. Simone stood by a large digital flight information board, pretending to scroll through gate assignments on her phone. But in reality, she was bracing herself. It was time. Her mission had always been clear: identify patterns, test consistency, and report the truth. So far, Toby had failed at politeness, at patience, and most importantly, at accountability. Yet Simone still held a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, this third and final interaction would show something different. She waited until the check-in line thinned. Only a single passenger stood at Toby's counter. Simone let them finish, then took a breath and stepped forward deliberately, calm, neutral. "Excuse me," she said softly, approaching the counter with careful, respectful steps. "Sorry to trouble you again, but I just need to confirm my seat assignment. The kiosk printed 17A, but my app says 17B. I just want to be sure which one is accurate." Toby didn't look up right away. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, frozen for a second. Then he exhaled sharply, as though the question had pierced some nerve too raw to tolerate. "Seat assignment for flight 1271, he asked with thinly veiled exasperation. "Yes, that's right," Simone said, keeping her voice steady. He typed aggressively for a moment, eyes squinting at the screen. "It's 17A, he said flatly. "That's what the kiosk gave you. Your phone app probably hasn't updated." "That's not on me." Simone nodded once. "Thank you. It's just that." Before she could finish, Toby slammed his open palm down on the counter, the sharp thwack echoing across the terminal like a gunshot. Heads turned. A child nearby flinched. The air seemed to freeze. "Ma'am," he snapped, voice raised, jaw clenched. "How many times do I need to explain this? If the kiosk printed 17A, then it's 17A. You don't need to keep coming back here over nothing. I'm not your personal concierge." Simone blinked slowly. not out of shock, but out of calculation. The moment had arrived. The explosion. The public reveal of a man who had buried his own professionalism beneath layers of anger and fatigue. "I'm just trying to confirm a simple detail," she said, tone even but firm. "There's no need to raise your voice." Toby leaned forward slightly, voice lowering but dripping with irritation. "Then maybe don't ask the same question 3 times. Go ask the gate agent if you want a second opinion. I have other people to help." There were no other people in line. The lie and the venom in his voice hung there like a sour mist. For a long second, Simone didn't respond. She stood straight, arms by her side, her expression unreadable. She looked at Toby not with anger, but with the kind of weight that made people aware of just how badly they had misjudged the situation. "Are you sure," she said quietly, "you want to speak to a passenger like that?" The words landed like a slap. Toby's eyes widened slightly. His mind raced to recalibrate. He looked around and saw people watching, their expressions tinged with confusion, discomfort, even disgust. He opened his mouth, fumbling for something, an apology, a justification, a deflection. "I listen. I'm just," he stammered. "I didn't mean it like that. I'm under a lot of pressure today. Okay?" Just then another voice cut in. "Toby." It was Patricia. She had appeared so suddenly it almost felt cinematic. Her voice was low but sharp, and carried more authority than volume ever could. "I think we need to talk. Now." Toby turned toward her like a man caught in headlights. For a heartbeat, he looked like a child again, guilty, exposed, and terrified. Simone turned to Patricia and gave a subtle nod, one that conveyed volumes. Patricia's eyes widened briefly in realization. This wasn't just a concerned passenger. This was her, the secret inspector. Without another word, Patricia stepped behind the counter and motioned for Toby to follow her. His steps were sluggish, his face pale. The terminal resumed its quiet hum around them, but the aftershock lingered. Simone remained at the counter for a moment longer, her heart steady but heavy. The mask had come off hers and his. There was no more guessing, no more waiting. It was time to let the consequences unfold. Patricia led Toby away from the counter into a small back office near the baggage claim. Feeling that her job as an undercover inspector mandated it. Simone followed, albeit at a discreet distance. Once Toby and Patricia were inside, Simone waited outside in the hall, debating whether to reveal herself then or allow the manager to speak with Toby privately first. She decided to wait and see if Patricia asked to speak to her personally. Inside the office, Toby collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. Patricia stood, arms folded, her expression a thundercloud of disappointment. "What was that out there?" she demanded. "You yelled at a passenger. That is not acceptable under any circumstances." Toby didn't lift his head. I know. I'm sorry. My personal life is a mess. Rachel is threatening to leave me, and I got no sleep last night. I'm at my wit's end here, Patricia." Patricia softened a bit, but her professional demeanor remained. "I understand personal issues can affect your work. I've tried to offer you breaks. I've suggested you talk with HR. But there is no excuse for losing your temper like that on the floor. Do you realize how this looks? How many passengers witnessed that outburst?" Toby shook his head miserably. "I know. I guess not." Patricia took a deep breath. "I don't know if you're aware, but we have a secret inspector in the terminal today, evaluating our customer service. If that was the inspector you just spoke to, and the rumors say she might be a black woman traveling incognito, you may have just compromised your position at this company." Toby's eyes shot up, and panic flickered across his face. "Wait, she was an inspector." Patricia exhaled heavily. "I don't know for certain if that was her, but the timing is suspicious, especially considering how you reacted." Toby's mind spiraled. He felt sick. His job was already hanging by a thread. A major complaint or an inspector's negative report could be the final straw. Outside, Simone waited, reading a text from her boss. "How's the inspection going?" "Any major findings?" She typed a quick reply. "Major incident with Toby Harrington. We'll provide full debrief soon." She inhaled deeply, steeling herself for what came next. Simone was not vindictive. She believed in fairness and the possibility of redemption. Yet Toby's actions had consequences. Consequences he would soon face. Patricia was still speaking to Toby, her voice a careful mix of authority and disappointment when a firm knock sounded at the office door. The sound was sharp, deliberate, and immediately captured both their attention. Patricia crossed the room to open it, and standing on the other side was Simone Carter, composed calm, but with a quiet power in her expression that seemed to alter the atmosphere of the entire room. "Patricia, may I come in?" Simone asked, her voice professional, but unmistakably firm. For a moment, Patricia hesitated, her mind racing. Though she hadn't been officially introduced to the undercover inspector that corporate had warned her about, she suddenly knew without a shred of doubt that the woman before her was the one. There was a certain poise, a gravity in Simone's tone, in the way she carried herself, that confirmed everything. "Of course," Patricia said, stepping aside. "Please come in." Toby glanced up, confusion on his face turning into horror in real time. He looked at Simone as if she were a spectre from a nightmare, slowly realizing the depth of the mistake he had made. Simone entered the room, her steps steady and controlled. She stood before Toby, eyes steady on his, and offered no malice, only clarity. After a long moment of silence that allowed the weight of the moment to settle fully on everyone in the room, Simone reached into her bag and took out a small leather card holder. She withdrew a business card embossed with the Delta Airlines logo and handed it to Patricia. "My name is Simone Carter," she began clearly and directly. "I'm with Delta's Corporate Quality Assurance Division. I've been conducting a covert customer service audit at this terminal since this morning." Toby's mouth parted slightly. His face turned pale. He opened his lips as if to speak, then closed them again. No words managing to escape. Simone didn't need to dramatize the situation. Truth alone had more than enough weight. "Over the course of the last few hours, I have approached Mr. Harrington 3 separate times with standard reasonable questions that any typical passenger might ask. Each time I was met with impatience, discourtesy, and escalating hostility. His final response, screaming at me in a public space, was not only unprofessional, but deeply inappropriate for someone in his role." Toby shifted in his chair, visibly shaking. "I didn't know. I didn't mean to," he stammered. Simone turned toward him, not harshly, but with piercing honesty. "Mr. Harrington, your behavior today wasn't just a bad day. I observed you dismiss an elderly passenger who clearly needed help, and I saw you treat me as a nuisance for asking a simple follow-up. Whether intentional or not, your actions reflect poorly on the values this airline claims to uphold." He looked down, his hands clenched between his knees. "I didn't know who you were. I swear I'm not normally like that." This isn't about me being an inspector. Simone continued, her voice calm but unrelenting. It's about how you treat any passenger. I could have been anyone. And that's the entire point of these inspections. Patricia sat down beside Toby, her face a study in conflicting emotions. We've received complaints in the past. She admitted, her tone laced with regret. But today, I didn't realize how far things had gone. Simone nodded slowly. I understand. Personal challenges can bleed into professional spaces. I even witnessed Mr. Harrington in clear emotional distress. But that doesn't excuse yelling at passengers or treating them as if they don't matter. Toby finally lifted his head, his eyes glossy. I'm sorry, he said, his voice cracking. I really am. My life has been falling apart, my relationship, my sleep, my everything. I guess I took it out on the wrong people. I wasn't thinking, but I want to do better. Please believe me. Simone regarded him in silence for a moment. Do you realize that when you dismissed me, you weren't just being rude, you were making assumptions about who I was, what I needed, and whether I was worth your time? And it's not just me. That elderly gentleman, for instance. He could have missed his flight entirely because of you. What if he didn't speak the language well? What if he had a disability? Your job is to help people. If that's something you can't bring yourself to do, then you have to ask yourself why you're in this line of work. Patricia looked between them and interjected, her voice slightly more tentative now. Simone, is there any room for a second chance here? I'm not denying what happened, none of us can. But if there's a way to offer remediation, probation, mandatory training, closer supervision, I'd like to explore that, if possible. Simone didn't answer right away. She studied Toby, searching his face for something genuine. It's not my job to fire or save anyone, she said finally, but I do write the report, and I include everything. Today's behavior, past complaints I've reviewed, and my personal observations. What corporate chooses to do with it is up to them. She paused, then added, but I will include this, that Mr. Harrington appears remorseful, and that he's asked for a chance to correct his behavior. Toby closed his eyes for a moment, shoulders sagging in what looked like both relief and shame. Thank you, he whispered. You didn't have to do that. Simone offered a small, restrained nod. No, I didn't. But I believe people can change. Just know this: if you get that second chance, it's your last. And what you do with it will determine whether you belong here or not. She turned to Patricia. I'll file my report tonight after I land in Miami. Patricia rose from her chair. Thank you, Miss Carter, for your professionalism and for your fairness. Simone gave one final glance at Toby, then quietly exited the room, leaving behind a man who had just come face to face with the cost of his own actions and the possibility of redemption if he chose to seize it. By the time Simone stepped out of the office, word had spread among a handful of employees that the dreaded secret inspector had arrived, and Toby was in deep trouble. Patricia's expression was grim as she followed Simone to an unoccupied conference room, leaving Toby alone in the small office, hands shaking. Once inside, Patricia explained Toby's background. He used to be a decent employee. But about 6 months ago, something changed. He started showing up late, complaining constantly. We offered mental health resources and counseling through HR, but he never followed up. And now, this. Simone nodded, listening carefully. I'm not oblivious to the fact that employees are also people with real struggles. But Toby's behavior has potential legal ramifications if passengers feel discriminated against. Also, it tarnishes the airline's reputation. Patricia sighed heavily. Do we have any chance of saving his career here? That depends on Toby, Simone answered, and on how strongly corporate feels about setting an example. Meanwhile, Toby sat alone in the back office. He fought the urge to break something, tear out his hair, or break down in tears. Slowly, he pulled out his phone and texted his girlfriend, Rachel. I messed up big time. Might lose my job today. I'm sorry for everything. I'll do better if I get the chance. He stared at the message, waiting for a reply that didn't come. Whether or not he'd receive that chance was now up to the very person he had insulted and the powers that be. Back in the conference room, Simone wrapped up her conversation with Patricia. She promised to finalize her notes as soon as she reached her office in Miami. Her flight would be boarding soon. Patricia saw her out, thanking her for her fair approach, though acknowledging how unfortunate the situation was. As Simone walked away, Toby emerged from the office, eyes filled with remorse. He caught Simone's arm, gently ensuring not to startle her. Miss Carter, please, he pleaded. I know you have every right to write that report. I don't want to make excuses, but is there anything I can do to prove I can be better? Simone leveled him with a steady look. First, you need to realize that any passenger, regardless of how many times they ask the same question or what they look like, deserves respect. If you can't give them that, you have no place in customer service. Toby nodded vigorously. I understand. I'll do whatever it takes, training, probation, anything. Simone felt a swirl of conflicting emotions. She had witnessed Toby's worst side, but there was a flicker of genuine regret in his eyes. I'll mention in my report that you seem remorseful, she said at last. But Toby, you need to do more than talk about changing. You need to prove it with consistent action. Otherwise, this industry has no place for you. He bowed his head. Thank you. Simone sat in her window seat aboard Flight 1271, watching the jet bridge disconnect as the plane prepared for departure. Outside, the tarmac glowed in the soft afternoon light, the busy figures of ground crew moving in orchestrated chaos. But inside Simone's mind, the real turbulence was just beginning. The events of the morning kept playing on a loop in her head. Toby's raised voice, the audible shock from nearby passengers, and the stunned silence that had followed. She remembered the way his shoulders slumped when she revealed her identity, the panic flickering across his face, the genuine remorse in his voice. She had delivered her observations clearly and firmly, but a knot remained in her stomach. The job of an inspector was to remain objective, to protect the airline's reputation and ensure fairness to all customers. But Simone was also human, and this case felt messier than usual. Mid-flight, as the cabin settled into a quiet lull and passengers either dozed off or stared at seat-back screens, Simone connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi and checked her messages. There was one unread notification from her direct supervisor, Amy Roberts. The subject line simply read, Urgent, Toby Harrington. Simone's heart skipped a beat as she opened the message. Simone. We've just reviewed several past complaints filed against Toby Harrington, most of them related to rude behavior, poor assistance, or abrupt dismissals. Your incident today seems to be the final straw. Corporate is recommending termination. However, one of our senior HR executives is requesting your personal assessment before the decision is finalized. Can you be available for a video meeting tomorrow morning? Let me know, ASAP. Amy Simone stared at the screen, her fingers frozen over the keyboard. She had suspected that Toby wasn't a first-time offender, but hearing it confirmed gave the situation a harsher edge. This wasn't an isolated event born of personal stress. Toby had been on a downward trajectory for a while, and corporate was now prepared to end his career. But something inside her hesitated. She thought back to that final moment in the terminal just before she boarded. Toby, pale and shaken, had reached out, not physically aggressive, but desperate. The way he had gently caught her arm, his voice cracking as he pleaded for a chance to make it right. It wasn't just fear of losing his job. It was a kind of reckoning, a realization that he had become someone he no longer recognized. Simone exhaled slowly and typed her reply. "Yes, I'll be available. I'll share my full notes and recommendation during the call." She sent the message and closed her laptop, the soft clack of the hinge echoing louder in her ears than it should have. Looking out the window again, she wondered not for the first time that day how much grace people deserve when they fail. When does accountability end and compassion begin? The next morning, Simone logged into the video conference call from her hotel room in Miami. The panel greeted her, Amy Roberts, 2 HR directors, and a senior executive from Delta's Corporate Ethics and Compliance Division. Their faces were composed but curious. They weren't here just for protocol. They wanted insight, nuance, and something the numbers and reports couldn't capture. "Ms. Carter," the executive began after introductions, "we've reviewed your preliminary notes and Toby Harrington's file. It's troubling, but we understand he had a direct interaction with you, perhaps the most decisive incident yet. We'd like to hear your candid opinion. Do you believe this employee is beyond reform, or do you think he has the potential to change?" Simone didn't rush to answer. She organized her thoughts, then began with precision. "First, I want to be clear. Mr. Harrington's conduct was unacceptable by any standard. He was dismissive, unkind, and emotionally reactive. He embarrassed the airline in front of multiple passengers and could have seriously disrupted someone's travel experience. If I had been anyone else, especially someone unfamiliar with air travel, I might have felt humiliated, even afraid." The panel nodded, taking notes. But Simone continued. "I also witnessed something else. Genuine remorse. After I revealed my identity, Mr. Harrington didn't deny or deflect. He didn't try to make excuses. Instead, he acknowledged the depth of his mistake. He pleaded for a chance to do better, not out of panic alone, but out of something closer to awakening." She paused. I also considered the context. Toby is under personal strain, relationship issues, mental exhaustion, inconsistent scheduling, and yes, those factors can influence behavior. They don't excuse it, but they shape it. Amy leaned forward slightly. "So would you recommend termination?" Simone hesitated only for a second. "No," she said carefully. "Not yet. I believe this is a rare moment when someone truly sees themselves clearly. He's reached a turning point. I would recommend a final chance, a probation period, mandatory retraining and counseling, but with a zero-tolerance clause, one misstep, and he's out." The panel was quiet for a moment. Then the executive closed his notebook and gave a short nod. "Understood. Thank you, Ms. Carter. We'll take your insights seriously." 2 days later, the decision was made. Toby Harrington received an official notice, 3-month probation, mandatory behavioral training, and weekly counseling sessions. He was warned that any further complaint would result in immediate termination, no appeals, no severance. His signature was required at the bottom of the form, and when he picked up the pen, his hand trembled. He signed it. And as he handed the paper back, he whispered, not to anyone in particular, "I won't waste this." Whether he would prove that or not, time would tell. The airport felt different when Toby walked back in for his first shift after the disciplinary decision. Not physically, there were still the same rolling suitcases overhead announcements and endless lines of weary travelers. But emotionally, the place seemed heavier, as though it were silently watching him, waiting to see what kind of man he would choose to be now. He arrived 30 minutes early, in fact. That alone was new. He'd combed his hair with more care than usual, and even wore a clean, wrinkle-free shirt. Small details, perhaps, but they mattered to him now. Everything mattered, because now every move he made was being scrutinized by HR, by his supervisors, and perhaps most of all by himself. Patricia was already there when he clocked in. She looked up from her tablet, surprised to see him so early. Her expression was unreadable. "Toby," she said simply. "Morning, ma'am," he replied, voice steady but humble. She nodded almost cautiously. "Today you'll be shadowed for your first half shift. Not by me. By Miranda from Training and Compliance. She'll submit a report." Toby accepted it without flinching. "Understood. And after your shift you'll have your first counseling session. Don't skip it." "I won't," he said a bit more firmly this time. Patricia gave a small nod. There was no praise in her tone. No warmth yet, but there was a flicker of belief, fragile and conditional. The hours that followed were excruciating in a subtle, relentless way. Every passenger he assisted, every question answered, every bag tagged or itinerary, corrected it, all had the weight of a test. When a woman in tears approached, panicking about missing a connecting flight, Toby didn't roll his eyes. He listened. He calmed her down. He called the gate on her behalf and even walked her to the express lane. When a man's oversized luggage caused a delay, Toby didn't say or blame. He explained the fees and even helped the man rearrange some items into a second checked bag, avoiding an extra charge. Miranda took notes throughout, saying little. Her presence felt like a mirror one Toby couldn't avoid. But the hardest part wasn't the tasks, it was the inner voice. The part of him that had grown cynical and angry over months of exhaustion. That part kept whispering, "You're faking it. You'll slip up. You always do." He drowned it out with action. Not perfection, just effort. Sincere, patient effort. In the weeks that followed, a routine emerged. Every morning, Toby read the notes he had taped inside his locker. There were 3. Everyone has a story. Be the help you needed once. Rudeness is a habit, so is kindness. He attended every required training, all of them. Diversity and inclusion, conflict resolution, emotional resilience, customer-first strategies. He didn't just sit in the back. He took notes, asked questions, and stayed after to talk with the instructors. Not because anyone told him to, but because the fog in his mind was finally clearing and he realized how much he hadn't known. The weekly counseling sessions were tougher. Talking about Rachel, about the constant fatigue, the years of built-up frustration, it was like peeling back layers he'd spent so long ignoring. But little by little he began to understand something. His bad attitude hadn't just been about passengers. It had been about him, his unhappiness, his fear, his inability to admit he needed help. And slowly, miraculously, he began to change. He apologized to co-workers he'd once barked at. He brought coffee to the morning team once a week. He helped a junior employee fix a malfunctioning kiosk without being asked. He smiled more, not forced smiles, but real ones. Warm ones. Simone hadn't contacted him, nor had she made herself visible. But that didn't mean she wasn't there. During one of her discreet follow-up visits to the terminal, she spotted Toby from a distance. She didn't approach. She just watched, observed. And what she saw was unexpected: a man trying. There was no grand performance, no forced politeness, just a quieter version of the angry man she once encountered, now making room for patience, for softness, for grace. And she wasn't the only one who noticed. Passenger surveys at Terminal B showed a steady drop in complaints. One even mentioned Toby by name. The gentleman at check-in helped us rebook after a cancellation. He stayed calm when others panicked. Whoever he is, he saved our trip. Back in his small apartment, Toby read that comment one night, forwarded to him by Patricia. He stared at the screen for a long while. Then he opened his phone and texted Rachel. "Started therapy. Finally, I'm trying to fix the damage, not just between us, but inside myself." She replied 3 hours later, I noticed. "Let's talk next week. I'm proud of you." Toby's transformation wasn't instant. It wasn't perfect. He still had bad days, still got frustrated, still had to catch himself before snapping sometimes. But for the first time in years, he had something else: awareness and choice. He was no longer the man who barked at an elderly traveler. He was the man who now guided one gently to his gate, repeating instructions slowly, kindly, until he saw understanding in the man's eyes. He was no longer the man who saw passengers as burdens. He had become someone else entirely, someone better. And all of it, he knew, started with the woman who had asked him the same question 3 times. But Toby's hard karma wasn't about losing his job immediately. It was about confronting himself. He had to face the consequences of nearly everything he'd ignored or taken for granted. He had to re-earn the trust of the people around him, day in and day out, with no shortcuts. One day, Toby saw that same older gentleman he had so callously dismissed. The man recognized Toby at the check-in counter and hesitated, fear flickering in his eyes. Toby forced a warm smile. He gently approached. The man offered to help him with his baggage and to navigate the kiosk. With patient guidance, Toby made sure the man printed the correct boarding pass. By the end of the exchange, the man, though still wary, nodded in thanks. An hour later, Toby felt a tap on his shoulder. Turning, he saw Simone Carter, who had been in the area quietly observing. He hadn't even noticed she was there. A wave of shame and pride mixed in Toby's chest. "You did well," Simone said softly. "More importantly, you showed respect and kindness." Toby swallowed, then nodded. "I'm trying." Simone offered a small smile. "Keep it up." In that moment, Toby realized that while he might never be best friends with Simone or erase the damage he caused, he could still improve and perhaps one day fully atone for his missteps. So there you have it, the story of how one quick-tempered airport attendant thought he could shrug off a polite black woman's request for help, only to discover she was the very person assigned to observe and report on his job performance. In the end, he faced the consequences of his actions in the most dramatic way possible, nearly losing his livelihood. It's a cautionary tale for anyone who forgets that every human interaction has weight and importance, especially when you work in a customer-facing role. If you found this story eye-opening, if it stirred any emotions or made you reflect on how we treat one another, then do us a favor. Hit that like button. Share this video with your friends and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss more stories that reveal the hidden truths in everyday moments. Thank you for watching, and remember, kindness counts no matter where you are.